Thank you for joining me on today's episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. Today, I interviewed Chad Johnson, the founder of ScRxipt. I think you're going to love this amazing entrepreneur's journey as he goes from corporate America to launch a business that has an amazing backstory to it, a personal tag for him in his life, and a passion and a purpose as he moves it forward. Let's listen to his story.
It's funny. So I remember being an undergrad in college, and I remember saying, I'm going to retire from a 9 to 5 by the time I'm 30 and have my own establishment. Right. And I just kept repeating that with my friends. And I had no clue what I would be doing, but I just knew that I would not be in corporate America or a 9 to 5, but really have my own enterprise and establishment. It's something that I knew. Looking back, it's kind of like discernment. Little did I know what I'd have to endure.
You know, sometimes when we decide to get a business started, we just have to make the leap. Part of what I do oftentimes when people feel like they got pieces that are pretty much ready to go, if I think they have the essentials, it's like off the diving board into the pool. We got to get going and we got to figure it out. And as Chad said, he didn't have it all figured out. He didn't know exactly what he was doing. And I think that's part of the courage that it takes. If you're going to have the stuff it takes to be a small business owner, to develop into an amazing entrepreneur, you're going to have to be willing to understand and take some of those risks. Chad's journey is quite awesome. And I want us to continue to listen as you see where he goes next.
So I did make that transition. By the time I was 30, it didn't happen how I expected. I was at Aurora Healthcare. My background is human resources, organization development, business. And I really got this spiritual leading to lead my career, and it did not make sense. So this is back in 2008, where I've got a wife and 2 children, young children at that time. I've got a 8-year-old daughter and a 3-year-old son. I'm like, I can't leave my career. I'm like, got kids at home. I got a wife at home. Like, I don't have anything lined up. And so after a year of really fighting, I kind of finally surrendered and said, all right, I think I'm going to follow this spiritual leading. And I left my career in February of 2009 and still didn't know exactly what I was going to be doing. I became involved with a digital media and telecommunications company. I saw that there was an opportunity for us to potentially deploy digital signage and Wi-Fi on Milwaukee County Transit System buses. And I'm like, wow, this could be a major opportunity here. So I found someone who's still been a business mentor for me until this day to give me investment capital to buy shares in an S Corp so I could be a partner in the company. And that was like my first entry into buying shares in an S Corp. Now I'm a partner. All right, now I'm responsible for helping to grow the business. So I didn't start it, but I was able to come on board. It didn't occur as I anticipated, but I took a risk, but I learned something, right?
There we go. Many entrepreneurs have gone down this path that I've talked to. God brought them this opportunity and then they chose to seize it. They feel that leading, they feel that call, and they know it's the direction they need to go. And it doesn't seem to make sense. He had a family, he had young kids. Talk about the ways traditional job paths chain us to a path. What are you going to do without the benefits? What am I going to do without the steady paycheck? You have to plan. You have to have a thought about it. And I guarantee you that Chad was thinking about it a lot in that year before he went. But he learned a ton by partnering with a telecom company, partnering with an opportunity to figure out what to do and how to get into business. And then he went out and found how to get some money in order to make that happen by partnering with an investor. Let's continue to listen to Chad's story as he goes next into more about that investing partner.
And that individual who gave me investment capital to be a partner shared something with me. He said, most people think we invest in businesses. He said, I invested in you. And so that was a kind of a shift for me in my thinking, like, you invested in me. Yeah, no, you saw a dollar sign. He's like, no, we invested in you. And so for me, that was kind of that paradigm shift that says, wow, okay, well, yeah, he still was saying, I invested in you and I think you're going to do something amazing. And so we've stayed in contact since that point.
Wow, Chad, go ahead and preach it, brother. This is something that so many of us miss and don't understand. When we first go for funding, we are so focused on our idea, on our stuff, on our product, on how and what we do, that we miss this truth. And I actually think it's true for banks as well, but it's especially true for investors. When you get your initial funding, people are looking to invest in you. Your story has to work. Your numbers have to match up. You have to have a real opportunity, but people are looking for you because the story and the opportunity and the investments and the numbers can work, and you can put anybody in there. They want to know, is this the person that I want to follow? When the plan falls apart, when things don't go according to how you design them in reality, it's just really kicking you in the butt. That's why investors are looking for that. And that's why I actually believe banks are doing that too. Yes, underwriting's got to run their requirements, but it is the story that ultimately ends up selling people. And they got to be convinced that you are the one to execute that narrative and be able to make it happen. Don't forget that as you go forward and whatever you're doing in your business, it's that story that matters. And you're the one who's the main character and that everyone's going to trust in. So Chad continues, after he exits this first venture that he's a part of, he's looking for his next opportunity. So let's continue to follow his journey.
So after that, I ended up being reached out to be a independent training consultant. And so that was the first thing I started on my own. And I jumped on board and I did that for over 8 years now as an independent facilitator and training consultant. And so that gave me the flexibility as well as capital to stay entrepreneurial. So after that training consulting kind of really took off, I ended up partnering with one of my former neighbors in a coffee company called Making Coffee. So it was really an opportunity where it was in response to really social impact and the need to do job creation. Eric Resch, the founder of Stone Creek Coffee, provided an opportunity that says, hey, we don't really know Central City issues, but we know coffee. And we think coffee could be a way to really create impact. And if there's anybody interested in partnering with us, we'd help to show you the ropes, maybe teach you how to roast coffee and create jobs. And so Jared Cronk and myself partnered. He did a lot of job creation with high school students and others. And we partnered to create Making Coffee, a social impact coffee brand that exists to this day. We've been able to put high school students to work, and individuals who have difficulty finding employment have had opportunities to work with us with events and learning fulfillment and business and marketing. And so that's been a great opportunity for me to really do social impact and really connect with a lot of folks across this great city of Milwaukee.
I love how Chad continues to pursue this. He used his God-given innate talents and his learnings and his experience to continue to pursue his entrepreneurial passions, his energy. He went out and did some corporate training, figured out how to launch that, but he wanted to do something more. And he was pursuing this opportunity that was showing up along the lines of the coffee. And then he went out and he found mentors, people who were already experienced in the category. This is the place where I think a lot of small business owners can get a lot better. And I don't think it takes a lot more than being willing to reach out and say, who else is there? We are not all competitors. And those who have the closed mindset of like, everyone out there is out to get my lunch, great. They'll just say no quickly. You just don't talk to them. But go find the ones who are willing to share, be a mentor, continue along your journey. You may change businesses. You may be doing something totally different, but those relationships are something that can last for a really long time. Ultimately, we are all able to use our God-given talents, not only to make money, and we can make the world a better place. They are not mutually exclusive. I know so many businesses are launched on purpose. They have a purpose and a mission that they want to achieve. And sometimes there's a conflict between how can I do this good and make money? It is possible. It is. And when you're locked into what your purpose is and what you were created to do, you can go out there and do both, because you can do good things and you deserve to get paid for exactly what you're doing. Now let's rewind Chad's life back and let's go listen to some stories from his childhood. I think you're going to find this really interesting.
Even going back earlier in childhood, wasn't necessarily entrepreneurship, but ironically, I played football, played sports, but I literally played office. When I would get back to my room, I would set up like my TV, the old tube TV on a rolling cart, and I'd like pens and paper up on there, and I'd like pretend I was in the office administering things. And so that was kind of a part of my fabric since I was a child.
That's really fun. Chad enjoyed make-believe playing business. It's interesting how all our influences around us help determine how we build up, how we grow. And it's part of, we take our wiring and we take our outside environment and it builds who we are, but we also get the choice to go down some paths. Think about when you describe something to a fifth grader. If you describe your business and your concept to a fifth grader, we tend to simplify it all down. We take out all the garbage that no one actually cares about, and we explain it in a way that's concise and simple. That's probably the core of your power pitch. I want you to take that. And I want you to remember that there may be some things that go all the way back to your childhood that may be anchoring what you're doing today. And I think you can channel some of those in order to make your business even more amazing. Now let's speed up time again and start hearing about how Chad got on the path to launch ScRxipt.
Here we are today with ScRxipt. It's something that my mother got in the vision over 25 years ago. She feels God gave her the inspiration to ScRxipt, where she read articles about seniors that were eating cat food because they couldn't afford living expenses and their medications. And so fast forward 25 years later, we're still in that same predicament where folks are having difficulty paying for prescription medication expenses as well as living expenses. And so after she shared that with me, and she herself went through an experience where her employer filed for bankruptcy and she lost her retiree insurance and her pension is in jeopardy. She was having difficulty paying for meds and her expenses went from $20 to over $400 out of pocket for the same medication. And she's like, something's got to be done about this. And that's where she shared ScRxipt. She said, hey, God gave me the name ScRxipt 25 years ago. And I'm like, well, what the heck is ScRxipt? And that's where she's like, Chad, that's where you guys come in. You figure it out. And so I've been figuring it out since November of 2019 of, well, what can ScRxipt be? How can we really create impact for individuals like my mother to really assist them with needed finances to take care of medical expenses and prescriptions so they can live well?
Wow. That's something that I referred to as holy discontent. I mean, I love that Chad was able to be in touch with that and hearing the story from his mother of how so many years before she'd had this insight, this gift given to her, and she just shared that with Chad. But then she says, that's for you to figure out. We're all on this journey for a reason and a purpose. And one of the things I love about that story is that Chad has that anchored in the purpose of where he needs to go. Hearing the story of people not being able to afford their meds or making significant sacrifices to afford their meds and finding a solution for that problem. He was anchored deeply in the problem and went looking for a solution. And I think that's such a powerful message that so many of us can figure out. And he went from, ultimately working on that from a corporate role to the telecom company to doing a trainer to working on the coffee to moving into ScRxipt. They're not necessarily connected in terms of what they bring to the table in terms of a business opportunity, but they are part of his continued journey where he keeps learning to the point that he's ready to take on this challenge. So let's listen as he brings up the story to how the rest of the family is going to react. Because for those of us who are in a family relationship, there are impacts. We're not operating solely. There are impacts that are going to have, and you got to have those discussions and get the understanding of what's the next step going to be. So let's listen to Chad's story.
My wife had known that I'd been really toiling throughout the year. Like, feel like I'm led to leave my career, but I'm like, I'm not sure if this is right timing. And so the day I remember coming home and I looked at her, my wife's name is Robin. She came home and I said, Robin, I'm giving my 2 weeks notice. I'm leaving my career. And she knew that I didn't have anything lined up. And literally, right? This is verbatim. Folks are like, no, you're making this up. I'm like, no, literally. In that moment, her immediate response to me was, well, if this is where God is leading you, I trust you. Like, whoa. I didn't expect that. Not that I didn't expect it from her. I'm expecting what I heard from the other family members. What are you doing? You got a wife and kids at home. You got a great career. And let's not forget, in that 2008, 2009 period, we had another recession going on, right? The economic downturn. So I'm hearing all of that. I've got the VP of HR who took me out to an Italian restaurant for lunch. And if she had the guts, I think she would have said, are you on drugs, Chad? But she said everything other than that. She's like, where are you going? What are you doing? And I'm saying, well, wherever I'm led. I'm not exactly clear, but I just know this is the right thing. And what I look back and realized was it was less about having clarity about what was happening next, but having clarity about really being led by my faith. And it impacted others to say, wow, he's really being led by his values and his compass and his faith. And that impacted a lot of individuals. So spiritually looking back at it, that was really the impact that it needed to have. And so I've got family members and everyone else outside of my home that's saying, what's going on? Is everything okay? Is Chad going to be bringing in income? And literally for the first 2 years after I left, it was now an income generating, right? And so my wife was a teacher at that time. And so her salary was frozen because of the economic downturn. So like everything is happening, right? Not what I anticipated in leaving my career, but my wife was right there. I mean, it literally brought us closer together as a family. It actually got stronger.
Being an entrepreneur is a difficult, oftentimes lonely journey. You probably heard that said before. Maybe you've experienced that. Chad is telling some of that story. And here's one of the keys. One of the keys is that I'm not exaggerating when I say you got to surround yourself with other people. That's why we're doing this podcast, Entrepreneur Encounters. I want you to encounter more entrepreneurs so that you don't have to continue to believe that you're alone and that it's lonely. It doesn't have to be that way. Chad and Chad's wife, they shared a faith that not only got them through the situation, but they ultimately grew closer together as a result. So many people aren't going to understand it. You heard him say it. His HR manager took him out and essentially like, are you nuts? You got friends saying like, what's he going to do? How's he going to make money? How's he going to make a living? What are you going to do for benefits? Classic question a lot of people hear. That's not all that defines what you do. Sometimes we need to follow that leading in that path and step out with courage. In my case, in my experience with my family, we actually had a couple different experiences. Number one, you got to sit down, you got to talk about it. What is the future going to look like? We sat down and we looked at a budget and we understood what we needed to do. My wife was supportive. The first time we went into a venture, we didn't have the kids around. The second time, the kids were there, and you had to really consider what is it you need to do to be successful? And you got to have an agreement. And then ultimately, when my wife decided to join our business, we had to have a roadmap and a path for that. And so you set a path, you agree on it, and then you go to work and you try and hit targets. And I want to put one thing out there about targets. Please do not put these unrealistic targets out there where tomorrow I want to be super successful. Chad said it was 2 years non-revenue generating activities. It may take you a long time to build the relationships, build the core, build the business, build the service, but be willing to communicate, be willing to set realistic goals, and be willing to understand when you need to adjust and change and when is it time to do something different because the family deserves something different. All this stuff has to go on. While it can be lonely, it doesn't have to be lonely. So Chad goes on to share more about the experience with his transition and its impact on him personally. Let's hear more about what he's got to say there.
And so it's like just really staying the course for me was that lesson of like when it's difficult to get out of bed, when you're like, what am I doing? Am I going crazy? I don't have a reason to get out of the bed today. Like just get up, right? Just keep moving. I'll even share at that time, I even went through a foreclosure, right? So my primary residence, I went through a foreclosure, which was a tough situation to go through. And so you're like, man, what is happening? Got a college degree. I had great credit, had a great salary and income, and I left my career for this? Like, this can't be how it's supposed to be. So it was a very rough transition, but I stayed the course. And in that process, opportunities kept coming my way. Right? I really understand now it was a humbling period for me of understanding, really building myself up and understanding I'm not in control, really. I'm really not in control of my destiny, as some would say. I have to be in alignment with it. And I'm a man of faith. And so understanding God lays out the blueprint and I've got to really just get in the will of it.
Wow. Talk about humility, talking about really going to a depths, but staying locked in to your convictions. So many of us can probably identify with what Chad's experiencing, and others are like, what on earth is going on there? But he was committed to the path that he was on. His family was committed to the path he was on. I think that's really important. We have to learn to go wherever God's leading us. We have to learn to follow that path. It doesn't always look like the easy path, and you're going to have tons of naysayers and haters. And that's why you got to surround yourselves with support that really matters. At the end of the day, Chad figured out who he needed to trust in, where he was going to go, and where the path was going to lead him. He didn't decide where the path led him. He had to follow it. I'm sure he didn't plan on foreclosure. But when he looks at it on the outside, he can see that he was exactly where he needed to be and to make the progress that he had to happen. Anyone else relate to that? I know I have some stories that I can relate to that in my own business. You know, it's oftentimes when we're at our very lowest that things finally start to look up. We got to hit that nadir, that low point in the journey. That's where Chad finally gets in his story. And I want you to keep listening as we look forward and hear where ScRxipt is going and how it's meeting a need.
So my mother's pain point was, wow, for the same medication, I'm paying $20 out of pocket with retiree insurance. And now it's $400 out of pocket for all my medications. It's like, that's crazy. I can't afford that. And I need my medications. And so as I'm thinking about it, I'm like, well, my brother's in Atlanta and my younger brother and I are still here in Milwaukee with my mother. I'm like, well, we got to step in and help her. Like, but how are we going to do that in a way that's kind of consistent, it's seamless and easy? And so we started thinking like, well, what exists out there? It's got like Cash App and Venmo is what you do. And some people use GoFundMe's and things of that nature to raise funds anytime they're in financial bind. But the limitation of those is if I'm giving my mother $400 to $500 a month to help her pay for her medications, like, hey, it's my mother. At the same time, I want to make sure the money is being used on what it's meant to be used for. And if I'm giving it on Cash App, Venmo, GoFundMe, it's the honor system. But it's like, how do you do it in a way where you're saying, hey, this money is there for this specific purpose. So it alleviates your pain point. So your money you can use for whatever else you want. But this is specific for that reason. And so as I started really engineering the concept in my mind and saying, hey, wouldn't it be great if ScRxipt was kind of like that peer-to-peer payment platform ish, where you can send money to someone, but funds are restricted. So I started thinking like, hey, well, there's Cash App and Venmo, but I also have what's called a health savings, right? So pre-tax dollars are put to the side and you have a debit card and those funds are able to be used at specific, locations only for medical, prescription, dental, things of that nature. So I started engineering the concept of saying, wow, well, maybe peer-to-peer payment, kind of health savings accounts. What if this could be, in theory, like a socially funded health savings account where anyone could give to an account to help you save for your out-of-pocket expenses, but the funds are restricted, right? Where trust is built into it.
Wow, what an incredible story. Chad took a really intractable, difficult challenge and he figured out a way to be able to address that in a way that's secure, that's successful, and really addresses the need at hand. And he turns it into a seamless solution. Well done, Chad. That's what we need to do. We need to look at a problem. We need to find a solution. Well, just like you, I can't do this on my own. So I need to thank my awesome wife, Kate, for doing the editing on these episodes. I need to thank Chris Creed for doing the music on both our intro and our outro. I hope you've enjoyed this episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. If you did, I want to encourage you to please like it, share it, and do subscribe so you can stay up to date with new items that are coming out. So again, thank you for joining me on this episode of Entrepreneur Encounters. I'm Brent Halfwasson, Milwaukee Small Business Coach, and I want to invite Chris to take us out. Ready to take